Welcome to Truth, Money, and Freedom. Today is Wednesday, December 11th, 2019. We're doing a bit of a podcast here about something called the financial milkshake theory. And here to explain it all, I have with me Conjecture from our very own Truth, Money, and Freedom. Welcome, Conjecture.
Hello, Timmy.
Hey, let's go ahead and get this one started here. I actually am very much looking forward to this. And it all
Me too.
started with Ludwig von Mises, did it not?
That's how I'm starting it because he is the basis. I wouldn't say he's the basis for the theory, but he's sort of the basis for the kind of thought that this theory kind of goes through.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, I've got a picture of him on the screen so the viewers can actually see what he looks like, but you got something you want to add to that, don't you?
Yes. So this is straight from, Ludwig von Mises from his book Human Action. There is no means of avoiding the final collapse of a boom brought about by credit expansion. The alternative is only whether the crisis should come sooner as a result of a voluntary abandonment of further credit expansion or later as a final and total catastrophe of the currency system involved.
And that's
And
basically a
remember,
hyperinflation, right?
well, I mean, it could be a few things because Ludwig von Mises lived through, through the period we would call the Great Depression. It was a global depression, and it was the transition period from which the, currency dominance status went from the UK to the United States.
Okay.
Both two-letter countries, UK, US, both starting with U. Just marking out the coincidence. Um, if you want to switch to the next slide,
Okay, gotcha. What I've
or
got on the
thing in the
screen right
browser.
now is a YouTube video. And by the way, for those of you listening into this podcast, just check the description section below. We'll have links for everything we're showing you. Okay, the next one is the update on the coming currency crisis, revisiting the dollar milkshake theory with Brent Johnson.
Yes, yes, Brent Johnson. Well, what he goes through with the dollar milkshake theory is the idea that what's going to happen in this coming crisis and the way that it's shaping up is also something that Peter Schiff has talked about, which is you have a one currency, or currency that's fairly dominant. And as we go into this crisis, because at the moment we have higher interest rates than a lot of the other dominant currencies out there, so we have investment coming in from Japan and the eurozone, and everything's dumping into the United States at the moment. With all of the just because our interest rates are higher, you have some nominal return on your investment and so forth. And due to that, the stock market could actually go significantly higher before the crisis hits. And in this video, he also talks about the dollar strength index, the one against the other major currencies like the
Hmm.
euro and the yen. But if you weight it by trade, which is another index he talks about in that video, the United States dollar has already broken out. And if you don't consider the major currencies, we're broken out, most other currencies as well in terms of the strength of the dollar against them.
Yeah, the dollar is still the shiniest turd in the box for many reasons. It's the world reserve currency still.
The cleanest dirty t-shirt.
Yep, there you go.
And the dollar milkshake theory is that as we lead into this crisis, which will eventually break the currency system, as I, quoted from Ludwig von Mises, it's because we put the crisis off for so long. It's going to go from a crisis to a collapse of the currency system involved. And Ludwig von Mises lived through the first, what do you call it? The first switchover of the world reserve currency from the UK to the US.
Hmm.
So that's where his quote comes from, is that transitionary period. And we're going to probably have a global financial depression during the changeover. The during this as this crisis begins to unfold, he also believes we're going to have a blow off top on the dollar, because as these other major countries begin to start failing, that all the investment is going to pile into the United States, as Craig called it, Chaos Craig.
Hmm.
The United States stock market is the world reserve stock market.
Right.
So we're going to be where all the money runs to. I also have a source that I'll be putting in the description below on why the U.S. stock market's going up, and it is actually strongly related to what do you call it? It's strongly related to the central bank's balance sheets.
Hmm.
Uh,
If I can inject
uh,
something really quick, the points that you're making definitely go against the flow of some people that really do think that we're going into a major crisis and it will start with a stock market collapse, much like it did in
yeah,
1929 into the Great
it
Depression.
probably will.
And,
But before we get to the collapse, we'll probably have a blow off top.
yep. So it could go, in other words, what you're saying is the stock market could go much, much higher before
Mm-hmm.
we have a blow off top. Let's say Dow 40,000. I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are saying Dow 30,000. And in fact, I even remember when there were folks out there saying the Dow's going to go to 20,000. And a lot of us out there, me included, said, no way. There's just not enough money in the system to bring up the Dow to 20,000. And this is when it was at 16, 17,000.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't that long ago, actually. It was, literally like 3, 4 years ago. So,
Yep.
so at
And
any rate, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh yeah, what I mean by a blow off top is that it kind of worked the way that Bitcoin did. So Bitcoin was going to go into a correction, and right before it went into the correction, it went into a massive rally before coming back down. But in this particular case, it's going to be a very, very long while before the United States stock market even begins to recover.
Yep. No one will trust it. Okay, gotcha. I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but I thought it was very important to let people know this is literally just a point of view, a perspective, if you will, milkshake theory that basically says the stock market is not going to collapse like right now. It's going to continue going
Yeah,
up because of money printing. So we'll get that out of the way.
and
Go ahead.
in the video, Brett Johnson basically says that, just because of all of the sheer amount of investment being piled into our economy, there is a good chance it may be a good few years before, the collapse finally. And if you go to the next
Yep.
graph, I have even more to add on that because
Okay.
what we're doing right now in this graph comes from the video we'll show you on the coming retirement crisis. Oh
Okay.
wait, we're probably on the retirement crisis video. If you
We
want to move
we
to the
are.
next
Would you
one,
like to go
and then
to a
we'll go
graph?
back. Yeah, we'll go to the graph and then we'll come back.
Okay, we're on the U.S. labor force participation GMI composite.
Yeah, so we're entering a point when the average baby boomer is beginning to retire. The halfway point when they, reach roughly 64s, roughly around this time period, and a massive amount of them are going to be retiring in the next few years, which also lines up with the dollar milkshake timeline. The government is trying to put off this crisis, and it's going to become unavoidable. As you can see, how the Federal Reserve balance sheet is keeping up with the retirees, because as you see, the labor force participation rate falls. And at the same time, when you invert the Federal Reserve balance sheet and you scale it, you can see it mimics and mirrors the labor force participation rate, and we have an idea of what the future projection will be because we know roughly what the GMI composite is,
Hmm.
which is the predicted labor force participation rate based on the number of retirees that are coming out or
Hmm.
coming around.
Yep,
And the thing about retirees is they spend less money.
they do.
You can, if you watch that video, if you want to go back to it,
Yep.
if you watch that video, he goes into all the details. They spend less on gasoline because they're not working. Um, they cut back on their consumption again to sell off assets. And that's why the Federal Reserve is pumping up the balance sheet, is they were all dipping into their 401ks. They were promised back in the 80s, you throw all your money in the stock market and you can retire by the time you get to your 60s. And the other day, me and Craig were even going over graphs of, at the same points in our life, what our wealth was based on our assets. And the baby boomers got in on the stock market after it had crashed from the 70s.
Hmm.
Uh, as you well know, the Great Inflation ended when Carter's Fed chairman, Volcker, I think it was,
Yep.
took interest rates well over 20%.
Yep.
And we had a huge recession in 1980. A huge, massive recession. But it corrected a lot of the malinvestment in the economy. And then Reagan comes along, appoints Ben Bernanke, and at the same time as we start recovering and the rate of inflation begins to collapse, uh, we have him cutting taxes. I mean, he should have cut government spending too, but you know, regardless, the same thing happened. He cut government taxes, so we aren't paying all of this, and he built up the economy massively. At the same time, we had massive job creation under Reagan. As a matter of fact, disproportionately large. We had more just in the total number of jobs being created under Reagan on a yearly basis than we did, even under Trump or Obama. Uh, just a smaller population. But at the same time, that's when a lot of baby boomers, at the tail end of the baby boomers, started entering the workforce as well, and they were dumping all their money into the stock market.
Yep.
And that's where the crisis is going to come in. If you want to switch over to the interest rate chart, I have a little bit to say that adds to that to illustrate my point. If you want to show into the peak, we can show everyone what Volcker did.
Yep. I'm on
What
the
he took
peak.
us up to. Yep. And the peak, that is where Volcker stepped in. He put interest rates so high, all the way up well over 20%. And you can see when it starts falling, some of that was Volcker because that was during the recession.
Hmm.
And when the rate of inflation began to fall, you don't need interest rates quite as high. And after Volcker, you have Ben Bernanke. And as you follow that curve downwards to where we are today, most of that is Ben Bernanke, or not Ben Bernanke, but that is Alan Greenspan. Why am I saying Bernanke? I haven't gotten to Bernanke yet. But Greenspan took us all the way down and down and down until roughly the 2008 crisis, somewhere in there. And that's where Bernanke was appointed. And when Bernanke took over, he took rates to zero.
Yep.
And he began really winding up the balance sheet. He continued the process that Greenspan started.
Yep.
All the way back in 2000.
Yep.
And not only that, as that that quote from Mises told you, is when these central banks are really going to try to put off this credit expansion collapse, they're going to crash the currency system because they didn't let the crash happen in 2000. They didn't let it happen in 2008, and it was going to be utterly devastating. But maybe we would have saved the currency system.
Yep.
Now we're well beyond that.
Yep.
We are trillions of dollars in. Go.
Yep, I was about to say, and it applies to, and I'll switch back real quick here. This is my opinion, but on the coming retirement crisis explained and explored is not just about the stock market going down, because Conjecture knows, and most of you who listen to me know, that I've been saying for a long, long time, these derivatives are literally going to play a large role in this. And I do think that the current repo is literally to buy back derivatives. And that's why the balance sheet is not expanding right now at the Fed. This is why they're carrying a 0%, gain, or it's staying the same because they're paying full market value for derivative products from banks while they're giving them cash to play with. And the reason they did this is I think they had to start getting derivatives moving again, and what the bank said was full cash value, because a lot of these derivative products, CDOs, CLOs, auto subprime market derivative products, credit card debt derivative products, are all stuffed into pension plans. And they needed to keep them going. So it's on two sides I'm looking at, not just what Conjecture's talking about today, which is on the stock market side, but I'm thinking about the pension side that's normally in bonds. So
Yeah.
I don't mean to get too complicated with it. I'm just injecting that little thing there because I think it's directly related as well. Okay, go ahead, Conjecture. We're still on the interest rate chart.
Okay. Well, since we're at the bottom of that, and we've taken this thing to zero, and we hiked them back up, and that's why all the investment came flooding in here, it's because we had positive returns. Do you want to move to, let's go to shadow stats and inflation?
Okay, I'm there.
Okay, so as everybody here well knows, because we never shut up about it, we talk about the price of education, healthcare, food, fuel, and so forth quite a bit
Mic
because those are
off.
some of the
Mic
most
on.
important commodities in your life.
Mic off.
So, and as you can see by John Williams' shadow stats, we are roughly in the 10% range on inflation, and the government's only reporting a few. Recently, I finally figured out where the government is getting their prices from. Do you want to move over to the billion prices chart?
Mic on.
Will do. It's here.
Okay. As you can see from the billion prices chart, this is the aggregate of a bunch of online merchandise and so forth. And what you don't see there is the price of fuel and the price of food and the price of education and the price of healthcare. Because you don't buy your healthcare from Amazon. You don't buy your food from Amazon. I mean, you can, but it's not even what they do primarily. Same thing with Walmart. Walmart may list some food, but they don't keep all of their food up there. A lot of it is, produce, so forth. And that's one of the things where a lot of these prices come in. So yes, Walmart does post a few different brands of a few different foods on their website. They actually post a lot. They don't post everything. Same thing with Amazon. Actually, I suppose Amazon kind of has a big collection now that they're adding that Whole Foods thing to their inventory or their repertoire. But still, you don't see your healthcare on Amazon. You don't see your education on Amazon.
Right.
Those prices are not being tracked by that.
Okay, just so I can put basically a small bit of emphasis on this. What Conjecture is basically saying here is that the U.S. CPI numbers, the Consumer Price Index, looks like it's based on online annual sales. Nothing to do with groceries, tuition for your kids in college, education, gasoline, healthcare. You don't buy any of these things online. And by the way, the auto market too. So what we're thinking is Conjecture has kind of stumbled upon here the actual way the U.S. government and the central bank, the Federal Reserve, the actual honest-to-God numbers they're using to tell us what inflation is. Okay, go ahead, Conjecture.
Now, if you want to go back to shadow stats, which is the next slide.
Yeah, let me bring you up. You got real quiet there.
Okay.
All right, go back to shadow stats. I'm on shadow stats.
Okay, go back to shadow stats. As you can see with shadow stats here, the interesting bit is we know that a lot of their prices are aggregated from online sales. When you saw all those articles being posted about Amazon keeping their prices low and this price war with Walmart, is what's bringing down the CPI. Well, now we know why they posted those articles, because they really are getting a lot of their prices from the internet.
Yep. And that being the case, we're looking at, a very, very, very small slice of the actual economy, aren't we, Conjecture? And if that's the case, then we're not getting the proper numbers. Now, I have on this channel, and Conjecture has many times too, been letting you guys know the 2% inflation is wrong. It's actually much higher than that. Gold is definitely sniffing this out. It is going up in price, and that's gold's job. Silver, not so much.
That's part of the dollar milkshake theory.
Yep, that's correct. Silver, not so
is that
much.
gold,
Go ahead.
yeah, gold and the dollar are going to go up together, which is going to be contradictory because the dollar's getting stronger while gold's going up in price. Gold is going up in price, even in dollar terms, because the dollar's failing. It's just not failing as fast as these other currencies.
Yep. And also, I hate to put this in trying to put it in context here. It's very important for our listeners to know that almost every single currency in the world, except for the dollar, has gold's at its all-time high right now, December 11th, 2019. And it's almost without exception. I think there's one or two currencies on the planet that don't have gold at their all-time highs. But the U.S. dollar, we're literally 500 and some odd dollars away from our high in gold. But the rest of the world has it at all-time highs. I'm sorry, I just thought I'd inject that. Go ahead, Conjecture.
Well, I mean, it's all related. That's what I meant to talk about before, is that the dollar milkshake theory says that, we're going to see the rise in price of gold against, one of the strongest currencies, the dollar.
Yep.
Because people are getting scared, and gold is the safety asset.
Yep.
And I'm not saying go out here and, back up the truck and buy a bunch of gold, because as he said in that video, gold is going to go down a little bit before it goes up.
Yep.
It's, it's going to have a bumpy ride on the way up, but how do I say it? I'm not here
Mic
to give
off.
financial advice. There are plenty of channels out there for that. I am just saying we do see a crisis coming. We don't know what the good investments are. The only thing we can really tell you is that in the aggregate, the stock market is a bad investment.
Mic on.
In the long run, maybe not in the short run. There's still, even after the stock market crashes in the aggregate, there's still going to be stocks that go up. As Peter Schiff always said. Peter Schiff has a bunch of money invested in foreign stocks, but I'm not sure if his theory on that is going to hold up precisely, because there's a bit of foreign countries who probably are going to start nationalizing, because every time they go into a crisis, they think growing government is the answer. The U.S. will do the same thing. So there's a lot of inherent risk built into the system, and knowing exactly what to invest in is well beyond me, because who knows what these governments are going to do. You know what? Maybe they're not going to do anything, and some of your investments will be perfectly fine, and others won't. Who knows?
Yep.
When people are scared, they run into gold.
Yeah, gold and typically bonds. A Conjecture, I realize my internet connection's a little spotty. So just so you know, I do know that. I see that. So I apologize about that. But yeah, I just wanted to mention the gold part, because I was going to say gold is going up with the dollar. That's exactly what's happening, and that's counterintuitive. Gold was supposed to be literally the way we measure currency. As they print more of it and it becomes worth less, gold becomes worth more. It's literally it's an inflation indicator. So, and it's not working that way anymore.
Dollar milkshake theory also puts forth the idea that some of the reasons why you'll see a bunch of bumps in the price of gold and why it might go down in the short run is because central banks stockpiled this stuff for a crisis.
Yep.
They're hoping for the currency collapse to come a little bit sooner so that they can, take all this gold and cash in their chips and be fine.
Yep.
But at the same time, if the crisis takes, a few more years, there's a good chance we could start seeing a bunch of gold enter the market. And in the next 2 years, maybe gold goes down a little bit in price, at least in U.S. dollar terms.
Right.
But, we know where this thing's headed, just because the fundamentals are there.
Yep.
Baby boomers are eventually going to be dying pretty soon, and they're going to need to be sucking a lot of wealth out of the economy in order to support their medical bills and everything else.
Mm-hmm. And those go into things that aren't measured by the CPI. So inflation.
There's a lot of...
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to inject a point real quick, Conjecture. Those the money that gets sucked out of the system will be spent on things that do not go into the CPI. So inflation will be rampant, even though the government keeps saying, "No, it's 2%. It's 2%." Yet you notice your hospital bill is going up 20% year over year. Yeah. Or in the case of tuition for kids to go to school.
And I just want to say this about these insurance companies that are going to have to be backing the baby boomers with their health care, is that these insurance companies are invested in bonds, and they are invested in the stock market, and they're invested in a few other assets. And the assets they're allowed to invest in are centrally planned by the government. So the government has a bias to tell them to buy more bonds as bonds start going down in yield.
Yep.
And that's all I have to say, so you should wrap up and do your plug.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and plug us once again. We're on BitChute, and here's what our page looks like right now. We're adding content. We've added some older videos on there as well. I'm not sure how many of our older videos we'll put in because some of that information doesn't matter anymore. For instance, stuff on Brexit, back in the spring. But we will continue every time we make a video. It'll be on YouTube as well as on our BitChute account. And if you look down in the description section, there's an invite to start an account on BitChute, as well as a link directly to find our page that you're seeing right now. So this is a backup measure because YouTube is doing some very strange things that even attorneys can't even figure out right now. But I think what their plan is to go to a pay type system. It's like, for instance, Hulu, Amazon Prime, or Netflix. I think that's the end goal for YouTube. So content creators like us, there will be no place for us there. So we will continue on in YouTube, but we'll also post all of our videos in BitChute as well. So come join us over there, and you can see the videos over there as well. If you're still comfortable with YouTube and you have no problems with it, then you're good to go. Please save a copy, the text, where you can actually get and find us on BitChute. But we are, as you see here, Truth, Money, and Freedom Podcast on BitChute. So if you just remember on that platform, you can go in and search for us. So, but I want to thank Conjecture for coming in and talking with us today about the the milkshake theory. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to actually sit back and wonder, because many of us have been waiting for this crash for a long, long time, and it hasn't happened. Nothing has happened. We've seen.
This time around, the fundamentals are in.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that too, but I'm saying that putting a date and a time on it is a son of a gun. You really can't do it. And I could go into some very strange conjecture on this. No offense to our friend Conjecture. And for instance, I do think that Wall Street wants everyone's retirement money. They want it for themselves. So that means they will crash the system at some point. They will do it. But as long as central banks are printing money and giving it to the large banks in their respective countries to play with in the market, I don't think we're going to have that crash until they decide it's time to do it. So that is my opinion.
And as you can see from that first chart we posted, the one about the labor force and balance sheet.
Yep.
Sort of graph. We know from that the balance sheet at the Federal Reserve has to explode.
Yep.
A minimum of $8 trillion in the next 5 or 6 years.
Minimum. And we all know that the Federal Reserve likes to keep a second balance sheet with numbers on it that they're not giving to the public. So it could be significantly higher than $8 trillion.
I believe that at the very least it is somehow proportionally related, because when we stack the official one over the labor force participation rate, we get a very strong correlation.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's pretty much it for now. And I want to thank all of you for hanging out as long as you did for this podcast. If you hung out to the very end, can you put the word tape measure in your comment? I would very much like to see if you listen to the end. So hopefully you guys got something out of this. And we are not telling you that we know when this will happen. We are not telling you that. And we're certainly not giving financial advice either. I say all the time what I do. And that's all I do, is tell you what I have done. But We don't know when the stock market's going to crash, when the dollar's going to become worthless. We don't know any of these things. We never have, and we never will. So,
Yeah, and as we were saying, if the dollar milkshake theory ends up playing out the way that the dollar could go significantly higher before it finally crashes.
yep. And by the way, that is
Stock
something,
market too.
yep, I want to give credit where credit is due. Jim Willie has been saying that for literally 10 years. He said the dollar would just go to all-time highs and literally just keep going high and then just disappear. Keep going higher and higher and higher and then bam, disappear. So that's what he's been saying for years as well. So, but at any rate, thank you very much for coming on and explaining the milkshake theory to us, Conjecture. Thank you again to all of you who stayed and listened to the video. We appreciate you guys watching our videos on Truth, Money, and Freedom. And once again, put the word tape measure in your comment if you stayed till the end. Thanks again. You all have a wonderful, wonderful day. May God bless each and every one of you.